Deborah Davis's book, The Secret History of the War on Cancer, which is an incredible read about how leading scientists knew in the 1930s that radiation and chemicals and pesticides were harmful to our health, but because of money and industry power and things that happened in World War II, a lot of that got buried, and we're focusing on treatment rather than prevention. Is the same thing happening today with wireless radiation and 5G wireless?
Yeah, absolutely. But even worse, in my opinion. And The Secret History of the War on Cancer is, I consider that one of the most incredible books I've ever read. It is just an incredible story about what was known or what was covered up and how long it took to have action on things that were known. So I believe the same thing is happening with wireless, only it's worse because it's everywhere. You can't escape it, even you know, when you're pregnant. I mean, at every age, everything, every living being on this planet is being exposed to it. It's not like cigarette smoke, where adults were getting the majority of the intense exposures. And now we know, I mean, that ambient tobacco smoke impacts health. How long did that take? And some of the same scientists who are funded by the tobacco industry to show, doing studies that show that ambient tobacco smoke is not so harmful, are the very same scientists working on cell phone radiation now, funded by industry, giving testimony into court proceedings, being on expert panels, et cetera, giving talks saying that parents who talk about this are cuckoo. So there's all this messaging going on that it's crazy, tinfoil hat, all this business, that fear-mongering, that is all part of the strategy to keep people from speaking out. People are afraid. So I hope one message I have is, don't be afraid to talk about this. This is happening. You know, what side of history do you want to be on? In other countries, there's thousands of people marching. There's entire governments doing something about it. Let's go. The United States can catch up. And where do you want, you know, years from now, what do you want to tell your kids when they say, when did you know? When did you know about this, and what did you do? We all can play a part in fixing this problem. And we have to. And I'm not here telling you that I'm like the perfect person when it comes to technology. I get in all kinds of tangles. I do not have the perfect family life where everyone is, you know, happy about certain situations. You know, even if we are all wired, which our home is, and that took time to do, and we are, there's way too much screen use going on. I mean, this is a journey. We need to, parents and everyone, every person needs to be on a journey to use technology in safer ways so we're not as distracted, so we can think clearly.
You recently said that the safety standards for our phones today are based on tests that were developed 20 years ago, and that they were developed for military and medical uses for people who didn't speak too much. 6 minutes. Please explain this in more detail.
So when they designed testing for cell phones, they're actually using the head of a 220-pound man. It's based on the top military recruits, and they don't look at the way that children's physiology, how small they are. So research that's looked at children and adults, for example, has found that children are more exposed. The cell phone radiation penetrates deeper into their heads, into brain regions that are, you know, critical for memory and thinking and all of that. Up to 10 times exposure into the skull for a child, for example. The limits we have, the laws we have are based on adult men, and not just shorter or littler adult men, but big adult men.
What is the World Health Organization's position and opinion on wireless radiation from cell phones?
Well, there are actually two entities in the World Health Organization. There's the International Agency for the Research on Cancer that has classified wireless radiation as a Class 2B possible carcinogen. That was about a decade ago now. And they did that because of the research linking cell phone use to brain cancer. But there wasn't enough animal studies at the time you need to have the animal and the human. Well, now we have the National Institutes of Health study, the animal study, which found clear evidence of cancer. And by the way, those are the same tissue types, very similar cancer cell types in the animals as developed in humans, and looking at humans who use cell phones for long term. So now the International Agency for the Research on Cancer of the World Health Organization is saying that they are going to reevaluate this exposure in terms of how do we classify it. And there are many scientists who served on the expert working group of the WHO, IARC, who are saying that we are going to the classification really needs to be changed. And some scientists are saying it is a proven human carcinogen. Some scientists are saying at least it's now to probable. And at probable, when the classification moves to probable, then regulatory agencies need to respond. However, let's say you just hear about this and you're like, well, what does the World Health Organization think? So you type in World Health Organization cell phones. You're going to come up to a page that says there is no scientific evidence that it causes health effects. That's this other entity of the WHO. Started with industry money by a scientist who was getting funding from industry, funneled through a hospital secretly. We didn't find out till later, for starting certain authoritative organizations on EMF. And there's these fact sheets that you'll see that are easy to understand, that don't even link to the classification paper I just told you about. They talk about it, but you could read this fact sheet and get lost. You think, oh, there's no problem. That's what I'm reading here. So there are these two entities, both under WHO. And that's how industry works well.
Is it accurate that insurance companies have refused to cover mobile operators for years now because of the risk being so high? Can you explain that in more detail?
Yeah, when people started coming down with brain tumors and filing lawsuits back in the 90s because, it was a cell phone. There was a series of lawsuits. Insurance companies backed out and said the risk is too high, and they don't cover. So Sprint, Verizon, Crown Castle, telecom is not covered. They don't have insurance coverage for these lawsuits because the insurance companies' white papers say this is a high risk. There's a white paper that just came out by Swiss Re that classifies it as 5G as quote-unquote off the leash and rates it as a high emerging risk, with the damages having a long latency, meaning we won't see it for a long time, but there could be damages down the road. And do you really want to cover this when you know you're going to have to pay up in time? Sometimes you have to buy pollution policies to cover electromagnetic fields because electromagnetic fields are defined as a pollutant. They're even defined as a pollutant by coverage you buy for your phone. So like if it falls, or you can buy consumers can buy insurance coverage for their phones for a little bit extra a month. It says in the fine print that electromagnetic fields are defined under pollutants. It doesn't say only above legal limits. It says electromagnetic fields and microwaves. So even companies are defining it as a pollutant.